This is the lecture for COM 456 and JAM 456 on nonprofit fundraising and earning good media coverage. There is no substitute for a good relationship with a mass media contact. In order to develop a strong personal relationship with media representatives, two things are important. First of all, it's important to remember that reporters are first and foremost people. They have likes and dislikes, communication preferences. Sometimes they're cranky, sometimes they're needy, and sometimes they can be extremely helpful. And so it's important to look at your media contacts not simply as a means to an end, but as an end in themselves, as interesting people with a life. Secondly, it's important to understand the culture of the media outlet that your targeted representative works for. So when I worked in corporate public relations, I worked with a variety of different editors who worked for major motorcycle magazines. And each one of these magazines had policies that restricted how the editors could interact with corporate representatives, and some of these organizations were extremely strict and they didn't allow any borrowing of product, and others pretty much allowed the editor to do whatever he liked. So it's important to know what constraints your editor or your journalist is going to be working under, because that way you won't be asking or suggesting things that are impossible for them to manage. So how do you develop a good list of mass media contacts? Well, one of the easiest ways is to ask for introductions. So if you encounter someone who knows someone who works in the media, ask them to introduce you. It's not difficult to do. Second, leverage the relationships that other people on the staff may already have with reporters. So if you haven't met a reporter but someone else knows them, it's good to make that meeting happen so that you're not a stranger if you ever need to contact the reporter. Third, it can be really helpful to take advantage of networking opportunities that can arise from participation in things like your local chamber of commerce, local public relations associations, and other types of associations, because these facilitate that networking activity that's so important. And finally, you can invite reporters to participate in panels at meetings and conferences and workshops. While they may not be able to write about the conference or the workshop because that would be a conflict of interest for them, it is a good way for you to get to know someone, to find out a little bit more about what's important to them. Do be careful, though, about inviting journalists to breakfast, lunch, or dinner, because for some journalists this could create an ethical challenge, because the value of the meal can sometimes make a journalist feel like they're being pressured to reciprocate with an equivalent value of something that they can provide, which is often a media story. So we don't typically ask for journalists to give back at that large amount. However, buying somebody a cup of coffee is probably okay. Now, that being said, you don't want to come to the relationship empty-handed yourself. So think about what types of things you have that a journalist might want or need. Actually, you have more than you might imagine. For starters, you'll have a key perspective on the particular issue that your nonprofit organization is addressing. You also have the ability to suggest new and relevant story angles. And you may also be able to provide a journalist with contacts that can tell their personal stories in a way that really will make a story pop. Of course, you can't do this until you've done a lot of reading, because you need to know a lot about the journalist's writing style and their interests so that you can pitch a story that the journalist will find relevant and interesting. It's also very important to make it as easy as possible for reporters to reach you. You should offer multiple methods for them to get in touch. Not only your business phone, but perhaps your cell phone, perhaps 1 or 2 email addresses, fax, you name it. There should be a way for them to reach you if they keep trying. Also, you should include after-hours contact information on your business answering machine or message so that you can facilitate responses to late-breaking news or stories that might be on deadline. Whatever you do, don't call screen, because it's quite possible that a journalist will be calling you from another number, and you'd hate to lose that opportunity to be included in an important story. effective media outreach involves constantly scanning to find new journalists that can address your story, tell your story in different ways. So it can be useful to develop a press list that includes journalists in all different fields of mass media. To find journalists, you can invest in a local media directory. You can review newspaper bylines and blogger bylines and magazine mastheads to get the names of journalists and editors. You can use traditional search engines like Google.com, and you can also search for blog editors using a search engine called Technorati.com. You can conduct searches using issue-related keywords, so you can find people who are writing about the topic that you're very interested in. And you should also be checking blog rolls to find additional blogs that may be related to your cause. Now, you should always ask journalists how they prefer to be contacted. Some prefer telephone contact, but many prefer email contact. And if a journalist has asked you to contact them by email, then you should be very aware of email etiquette. When contacting journalists by email, you should use short subject lines so that it's easy for them to read the subject even on a mobile device. You should keep your messages, likewise, short and sweet. Get right to the point so that they don't have to do a lot of scrolling to get to the information. Avoid attachments, which can use up memory and may carry viruses. Just embed the copy right in your email. In fact, some people make a policy of never opening attachments, so if you put all the important information in an attachment, it may never be seen. Now, if you really want to facilitate the journalist's ability to collect information at any hour of the day or night, then a great way to do that is to develop a website press room. This is a page or many pages on your organizational website that have 24/7 information that a journalist would typically need to get about an organization. For example, contact information for media relations personnel, press releases, which should be posted in reverse chronological order with the newest release right on top, fact sheets that give basic information about the organization and about various individuals who are involved with the organization, and fact sheets about the issue that your organization is addressing. When you put your fact sheets together, typically we like to use PDF because it prevents people from changing things, but in this case we want to use text rather than HTML or PDF format so that reporters can copy and paste the material quickly if they need to. A really good press room should also include downloadable photos, charts, graphs, even video broadcast roll, and audio sound bites. You can develop a method for alerting reporters every time you add new information to the website, especially when you've posted a statement in response to a breaking news story. Of course, you want to be thoughtful about how often you contact reporters. Basically, the rule is we want to avoid bombarding a reporter with paper, email, or telephone messages, or with all of the above at once. So while it's important to let people know when new information is available, you shouldn't just be posting something new so that you can be spamming people with notifications that are really unnecessary. Of course, even the most detailed and beautifully formatted press list won't do much good if you're not contacting the journalists on your list with story ideas on a fairly regular basis. So you should periodically set aside time to make pitch calls. And basically a pitch call is where you call and talk to a journalist about a story idea. You should start this process with research. You should be aware of what issues the journalist is addressing right now, what issues are hot topics, and once you do that, then you can think about how particular topics fit with the nonprofit activity that you're engaged in. When you call a journalist with a pitch call, you should avoid calling during the deadline time. So for radio, that tends to be early in the morning. Mid to late afternoon is typically crunch time for journalists working in newspaper or TV. You need to be sure that you can say everything you need to say in no more than 60 seconds. So you should get to those 5 W's and an H right away. 5 W's and an H, as you know: who, what, where, when, why, and how. And keep in mind that if a journalist is interested in your story idea, you'll have time to elaborate more later when time is available. Right, from here we're going to move on and talk about what to do if you're actually invited to participate in a mass media interview.